Coming up on this week's edition of the Stony Brook News.
From the Marine Corps to Stony Brook University, we explore one student's journey.
How do Long Island farms survive during the cold winter months?
Long Islanders are concerned about turkeys, and it's not because of Thanksgiving.
And we explore why less and less Americans are identifying as religious.
Stay tuned for all that and more.
Good afternoon, and welcome to this week's edition of the Stony Brook News. I'm Nirvani Williams.
And I'm Kiki Sedaris. Today marks the start of the public impeachment hearings of President Trump. William B. Taylor Jr., the top diplomat to Ukraine, and George P. Kent, a senior State Department official, will be questioned by both parties on national television. This is the first public impeachment hearing in more than 2 decades.
Democrats in Washington would rather pursue outrageous hoaxes and delusional witch hunts, which are going absolutely nowhere. Don't worry about it.
On Sunday, our very own Stony Brook women's soccer team won the America East Conference Championship after beating the Hartford Hawks with a score of 2-1. This is their second conference title in the last 3 years and was their 14th win of the season, tying the program record for most wins in a season. They take on Penn State this Friday in the first round of the NCAA tournament. Did you think today is colder than normal? Well, you're not wrong. The eastern 2/3 of the country is experiencing an Arctic cold blast this week. From Texas all the way up to New England, it feels like January and November, with temperatures dropping 20 to 40 degrees below what they usually are, shattering hundreds of records for the first time this year.
Monday, November 11th, was Veterans Day, and Stony Brook celebrated its nearly 140 veterans. Reporter Ashley Gagan covered last week's ceremony and took a look inside what the transition is like from service to school for student veterans.
Sophomore Tori Levine transferred to Stony Brook last spring after serving for 5 years in the Marine Corps.
It was hard because I guess I wasn't expecting how much work it was going to be, but I'm striving for a 4.0 and so I put a lot of time into it.
Going to college is something Tori has always wanted to do. She even started her schooling online while in active duty. And now that she's here, she's grateful for this opportunity. However, being a veteran student does have its challenges.
A lot of veterans can agree with me on this. When you first get out, you don't want to be around other people who were in the military because you kind of are finally a civilian. You don't want anything to do with it, really.
Here on campus, the Student Veteran Organization is ran by student vets to encourage them to meet other veterans who have had similar experiences. The Veteran Affairs Office is ran by administration to assist veterans with their student benefits, as well as any questions with their GI Bill.
We do a lot of programming, a lot of workshops. We try to make connections for them around the campus. And we just try to build a community that will make their transition here as successful as possible.
Last Wednesday, the Veterans Affairs Office and the Stony Brook Student Veterans Organization held its annual Veterans Day ceremony on campus at Stony Brook University.
I'm honestly honored and privileged to inform you all that beginning this year, Stony Brook University will recognize November as Military Appreciation Month here on campus.
The event honored both Stony Brook student veterans as well as outside veterans serving back to World War II. Tori believes that serving in the Marine Corps has helped create the person she is today.
I think that it's beneficial to join the military after high school because you get, very disciplined and you kind of grow up a little bit first and have experiences before you get to college so you can appreciate being here and actually want to get good grades and succeed.
Here at Stony Brook, student veterans are succeeding. According to Pamela, many of the nearly 200 veterans they serve have the highest GPAs at Stony Brook University. Reporting for the Stony Brook News, I'm Ashley Gagan.
As harvest season comes to an end, farmers in Suffolk County are trying to manage increasing costs and lack of labor on Long Island. Daniel Marcillo has the story.
The price of farmland is always increasing on Long Island, and with that comes the need to find affordable labor to ensure continued success on the farm. When most crops have been farmed for the summer, there is still a lot of work that is left to be done in the months between the beginning and the end of the next growing season. Despite the change in the seasons, the work on the farms is never ending. I'm here at Hobbs Community Farm to get an in-depth look at what goes on. Jennifer Ross is one of the co-owners at the farm and is at the forefront of the seasonal transition.
So what you're going to see is a lot of just transition from growing to kind of creating a good environment for the soil to be okay and flourish during the winter months and be ready so that when spring comes you can start planting in there.
Hobbs is a unique farm in Suffolk County because most of their work comes from volunteers and organizations throughout the area. Larry Corbett is a volunteer from Bethel Setauket AME Church and enjoys bringing new people to work on the land.
We allow people to work on the farm and putting aside religious, political, social issues. And the farm is a place where we bring people together to serve the community and to be part of the community and to care for this precious land that we have here.
For a community farm, finding labor can be hard, and for family farms, the struggle to find workers can take a major toll. It takes more than just a few people to take care of large acres of land. August Ruckteschel is a member of the Suffolk County Farmland Committee and was working on farms as young as 8 years old.
The availability of labor is a very important and lasting challenge. Consistently, I think if you ask farmers across commodity groups, they're always going to identify the challenge of identifying affordable labor, but also consistent labor.
Suffolk County is the backbone for farming in New York. According to New York State, Long Island is the top farming region in the state and has totaled just under $200 million in sales. For the Stony Brook News, I'm Daniel Marcillo.
30 years ago, the turkey population on Long Island was almost non-existent. Today, there are more than 3,000, and that number is only increasing. I explored how this is affecting residents. Turkeys and Thanksgiving go hand in hand, but what happens when flocks of these birds swarm your yard? Thousands of wild turkeys have been taking over Suffolk County and are impacting residents.
The fall came, and all of a sudden, we saw wild turkey, and it was the craziest thing.
In the 90s, turkeys were almost completely gone on Long Island until the Department of Environmental Conservation trapped 75 turkeys in Pennsylvania and relocated them to Suffolk County. Now, the population of wild turkeys on Long Island is more than 3,000 birds and growing.
The population is doing really well. The birds do really well with dry springs. They do really well in old growth, mixed habitat. So here, Port Jeff, Setauket, you have these North Shore communities, that very well manicured lawns, big oak trees, green areas and stuff like that. And the birds really like that habitat and they do really well. That's what we're seeing as the population is basically expanding.
However, residents are having some trouble getting used to their peculiar neighbors.
We see them again in the driveway, only now I had to get somewhere. I was driving my daughter to her early band rehearsal, and she was so afraid she was going to be late. And I said, well, that's okay. As soon as the car comes up, the turkeys will leave. They didn't. They just stood there, and then they walked as slow as could be all the way down the driveway, and we just sort of followed them. And I said, well, you're going to be late for band, but you'll have the best excuse ever. And she said, what are you talking about? Every kid who's late for band says it's because of the turkeys in their driveway. So,
despite a few inconveniences, these turkeys don't bother Mary Ellen.
I think it's just a fun part of living here is that we're sharing the space with, some of nature's creatures. So sometimes I can't pull out of the driveway because there's a swan crossing the road or a turtle, and sometimes it's a turkey who's not in a hurry.
A survey shows that for the first time, most Americans identify as having no religion. I took a look at why.
This is me and my dad and my sister at church when we were 9.
Esteban Garcia is a 20-year-old student who was raised Catholic, but now identifies as an atheist.
So every Sunday, my parents would make me wake up early and go to church, and we would have to dress up, and everyone would meet us there. We knew a bunch of people, so it was a routine thing. It was just normal. I haven't been to church since I was 13, 12 years old.
Esteban is just one representative of a new generation of Americans who are losing their religion. For the first time, no religion has topped a survey of Americans' religious identity, according to a new analysis. The survey finds that about 23% of Americans identify as no religion. For comparison, in 1972, only 5% identified as such. Since then, those who identify as Protestant have gone from 28% to 11%. and Catholics have declined from 27% to 23%. I spoke to political scientist and Baptist pastor Ryan Burge, who conducted the survey after noticing that his congregation in Mount Vernon, Illinois, was shrinking.
The church I pastor now was 300 people in 1964, and it was 96 people in 1996, and today we have about 20. You're seeing the national become very local for me, and I'm seeing it every Sunday as more and more people die off, and they're not replaced by new people, and my church is getting smaller and smaller as the years go by.
So where do you see your church and Christianity in America in general going in the next few years?
Unfortunately, I think churches like mine are going to close. And I think that's going to be an epidemic across the country over the next 5, 10, 20 years, especially as the baby boomers sort of age through and die off. They're not going to be replaced by the same number of people coming in. So we're going to see declines across most of Christianity. Less Baptists, less Methodists, less Presbyterians, and more people who go to a church that has no connection with any other church.
But why the shift? Burge says that it could be attributed to a number of factors, like the fact that Christianity is becoming more associated with the Republican Party.
I'm a Christian, a conservative, and a Republican in that order.
Or that people are using technology more often, which takes them away from the church community. It might even be that people are just being more honest on surveys. It could also just be a mixture of things.
The church is it exists for no other reason than to be the presence of Christ and to preach about Christ and teach about Christ. And I don't think that was always done well in the past 50 years. So if the church isn't doing what she's supposed to be doing, and if the pressures of society are coming upon people, American society, then it's kind of a recipe for disaster.
And that pressure seems to be on.
I think within my lifetime, Christianity will probably be almost nothing.
The question remains, will Christianity ever be salvaged? For Stony Brook News, I'm Kiki Sedaris.
That's all we have for this week's edition of the Stony Brook News. Make sure to keep an eye out for next week's edition of our digital newscast, the 631. I'm Nirvani Williams.
And I'm Kiki Sedaris. Have a good afternoon, Seawolves.